Good morning, everybody. Morning. Okay, so it is 10 o'clock, so I think we're going to go ahead and start our meeting today. And for those of you watching on the webcast, this is a stakeholder meeting related to the item that went to the June 27th State Allocation Board meeting addressing the acceptance of applications when funding is unavailable. The purpose today of our meeting is to hear you. We got a lot of letters and feedback prior to the last State Allocation Board meeting and at the State Allocation Board meeting that folks really wanted an opportunity to weigh in on this topic. Thank you for sending the letters. Thank you for the letters that we've received in advance of today's meeting. We've read them. We've heard you, and we want to definitely have an opportunity to discuss this today. As far as format today, it's a little bit informal. What our primary goal is today is to listen, to hear you, to see what other comments you have on this topic, to see if there are alternate proposals that should be considered. What we figured we'd do is we'd start off with just a brief overview of what we believe the item does to make sure we're all on the same page and understanding what our intent was, and then we'll take feedback. And we're going to do a lot of listening today, not necessarily committing. We want to really understand what you guys have in mind. So we want to take that back. As far as coming up, we don't have speaker cards or anything. We figured folks could kind of fill in this front table right there. So feel free to come up in whatever order you guys can work out. Just come fill it up so we can keep the meeting going. We've got about 3 hours blocked off for today. We'll see if things are going to roll through the full 3 hours. If so, we'll try to do a break about halfway through, but if it looks like we're not going to go the full 3 hours, we can kind of reevaluate that as necessary. And then after the meeting, what we plan on doing is taking it back, absorbing, and figuring out next steps for State Allocation Board meeting. What I can commit to is that what we hear today will make it to the State Allocation Board. We'll make sure that your comments are heard in the item format, and we'll see where else it leads based on our discussion today. So with that, are there any questions about format? You're going to have to come up with questions, though, because we need to speak into the microphones. Otherwise, the folks on the webcast will not be able to hear you. So, okay, with that, Michael is going to go into just the brief overview.
Okay, so this is the June item. It is in our June 27th board meeting agenda, but we pulled it out as a separate file. It is on our home page, too, if you haven't got a chance to look at it. What we've pointed out in this board item is that based on the workload we've received so far, these are actual applications for funding for our projects for both new construction and modernization. At the rate we are receiving applications, we're projecting that by October 2018, we will have received enough applications to sufficiently exhaust all the bond authority that's been allocated in Prop 51. We're also projecting that by September 2019, that we'll have exhausted or received enough applications to account for all $3 billion for the modernization program as well. So what these proposals, what we're doing in this item is proposing that we strike out of regulations that we added back in November 2012. Back then, we had a lot of discussion at the board and subcommittee meetings and implementation committees about what to do once we ran out of bond authority. So we've attached a prior board item discussion as part of this item too. We've mapped out the options that were discussed back in the day, and where we landed on was this application received beyond bond authority list. So as we've been working through Proposition 51s since July of last year, we've kind of been running into problems as he's trying to process the applications and some concerns that we pointed out in the item. Those being possibly inequitable access to the program for small school districts, financial hardship school districts, maybe not being necessarily represented as what we'd have hoped for. The limited ability for the board to make program enhancements with Proposition 51, making changes and applying those to applications where we have already received applications for 5 years now. How do we make program changes when people submit applications under a certain expectation? Based on the first 50 applications we processed in new construction, we've seen issues with outdated eligibility or not having eligibility even at the time they applied for the program. And then issues with expired agency approvals. Having this list for 5 years and having your plans go expire, we've seen numerous applications that had to update their applications. So those are the concerns we put out there. In our June item, the regulation changes are relatively simple as a whole. We've basically stricken out the language where once we've received enough applications to exhaust the bond authority, we would stop receiving applications. So current process is Once we receive enough applications, districts can continue to submit applications. They still need DSA approvals. They still need CD approvals, full DSA plans. Those applications are submitted to our office. We do a document check, make sure it is a complete application, and they essentially go to a room in our office, and they just sit there until we future bond or until we can actually process it. So it costs money for districts to do that. So what this proposal is doing is not going through all of that, not having districts submit plans, not mailing in this application, so that they're just sitting there. And proposing that when there is a future bond, if there is one, applications can be submitted at that point in time. That is the only regulations we actually changed in this part. Any references to submitting applications such as a financial hardship application and those boxes, those are the ones that are being stricken out. Those are the only program changes we're making at this time, though.
So yeah, that's the basic concept of the item, and we would look forward to your input on it. We saw a common theme in some of the letters related to shutting down the program, and that's not our intent, and I'd like to get some feedback too from folks that feel that this is doing so that we can get a better understanding of why you see this regulation changes doing that, so that we can see if there's something we can do to address it. And then just any other concerns that you may have with it. So with that, I'd like to invite folks up to speak so we can hear you.
Nobody else? Think I'll take four at a time? Not more than two.
But don't speak all at once.
Yeah, we'll try not to do that. I guess you want me to go first? I will. Don Ulrich. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for Clovis Unified Schools, and I also serve as the CASH, or the Coalition for Adequate School Housing Chairman. I think, first of all, it's important to recognize that the respect that CASH and all our constituents have for OPSC and SAB, and the great respect for the role that you fulfill. When you think about school facilities and how foundational they are to great schools and great communities, your role is so significant in that. And I think we need to recognize that and understand that we have to work together to fulfill that idea that all kids, all schools, all teachers have facilities to work in that are adequate. And I want to thank you again for establishing these stakeholder meetings. With your elected officials' input, and their recommendation, you accepted that input, and I think it's important that we hear stakeholder input on a significant change like this that we feel is significant to the program. And I want to start with just probably the most black and white issue for us, and that's the statutory requirements of Ed Code 17070.25 that basically says OPSC shall, and that's the important word, shall receive applications and shall expeditiously act. And I'll just read a portion of it. It says, shall be prepared to receive and expeditiously act upon applications on and after that date. And that date being November 4th, 1998, when SB 50 was put into law. So it's a law, it's a statute. And I think we all know that, we shouldn't use regulations to change statute. And that's really what we feel this is doing and why we feel it's not following the law. I think the other thing we want to recognize, and maybe this is why we have so many constituents speaking on this issue, it's probably not just this one issue. It's a pattern of the behavior of our elected officials and our appointed officials when the voters passed Prop 51 over 2 years ago. And since that time, the pattern has been, sell very few bonds, change regulation, that we feel is in statute. And I think when you look at that pattern and then this act, this regulation recommendation to stop accepting applications is why you get that feeling that the program is being shut down, right? And I think that's valid for people to feel that way. The voters voted for this. It's obvious that, I don't want to blame any one person, but it's obvious that the government in this case does not want to sell bonds at the rate the voters want them to be sold, and that our kids, our teachers, and our schools need them to be sold. So that's I think, why you're seeing this feeling. I'd also like to request on behalf of all our constituents is that you provide a summary of the stakeholder feedback you receive in these meetings, and if you could post it at least 10 days before the SAB meeting where you're going to bring this for a vote again, that would be helpful to get everybody's input and know how you've received it and how you've summarized it for those elected officials and the people that will be voting. I think you're going to hear from many constituents today that regarding the negative effect it's going to have on school districts to stop accepting applications. And what we really want you to understand and know how committed we are as constituents in California, that we want to ensure that our constituents understand that we're ready to work with OPSC and SAB, but definitely OPSC staff, on really some aspirational goals for funding school facilities and providing a funding source that would not be subject to debate, politics, and would not add to the state debt, but one that would be sustainable. All right? And that's quite a significant change. But we really have a feeling that that is where we need to go in funding school facilities in the state of California if it's going to be sustainable for all kids, all teachers, all communities. So that's an important concept to understand, is that that's where we want to head in the future. And we hope that OPSC and the legislature and the elected officials of California are with the constituents in that desire to fund school facilities in a sustainable manner in the future. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next.
Good morning, Barbara. Good morning, Michael. Again, thank you guys so much for having this and allowing us to come as practitioners in the program to come up and speak and kind of let you see where we believe the review has gone. So I want to address 4 things today, and I had sent a letter, and I'm going to kind of reemphasize those items in the letter. And the first is the equitable access to the school facility program. And the June staff report and some proposed regulations suggest the current SFP program is not designed to support and fund smaller districts or financial hardship districts. I've been in the program since 1996. So with the SAB passing in 1998, I was initial, starting of that program. And at the time, I've worked for non-financial hardship districts, and I've worked for financial hardship districts. And myself as a practitioner, as a financial hardship district, I actually felt I had more access to the program. The way that it's designed and set up, being able to have your upfront funds for land and design fees is a huge help, where non-financial hardship districts really don't have that. We're much farther into the program, expending your own funds. So I really think even the regulations of the financial hardship, I think they are clear enough to follow. I think it's something many districts do. It's when they have need. I really think it works well myself. I also had, in reviewing the OPSC data where it talks about that, it shows that the small and financial hardship districts, really what the data shows, proportionality with pupils, attendance, it's worked, especially when you look at the percentage of students is under 10% in the state of California that are financial hardship or small districts. So I really think there is equitable access to the program. Again, 20 years into this, I found that both sides work well. Second item I want to talk about is the program enhancements. And the staff report opines that the school facility program should be discarded. And I know I don't think, that's how I kind of read it. And hearing today, I know in your opinion that that's not what you're meaning to do. But we really think that part of that is, again, the small and financial hardship districts that have economic challenges. I really, again, think if you look at the data that's happened over the last 20 years, you're going to see that over 1,000 California school districts have been served, and over $100 billion has gone out to all of California school districts with local and state funding. And that's huge. We have such diverse needs in the state of California for all of our students. Making sure that they have adequate, facilities to learn in, where they have great lighting, that air conditioning works, heaters work, the water that comes out of the pipes from our schools that are aging is not brown, that we have new plumbing come in, making sure that our electrical is updated to handle all the technology that we need to compete throughout the world for our students. That's part of what this program has put forward in the last 20 years. Also, I don't believe that the SFP itself is burdensome in the way that it's written. The only complexities really come from the actual proposed procedures out of the state. So the SFP itself, really, as written, works. Again, it's how we do those procedures with that. I also just think that we should address the issues with taking the grant agreement that recently brought forward. That grant agreement, working with OPSC staff, we've really tried, I think the staff has worked with districts. You put together a great grant agreement that was very specific on what should be allowed in the program, what shouldn't. And I think that's more or less how we should address the SFP program, is working together with OPSC staff and districts to make sure that everyone's clear on what truly should be put through the program. So I think the grant agreement and the time that you put in with it was great work, and we appreciate that, because I think, again, as practitioner, every school district, I believe in transparency, that we should exactly be doing transparent as well as ourselves in what we've done with the funds the state has spent and making sure it's done correctly. The third item I wanted to address is the outdated eligibility for the new construction. And I really think that outdated eligibility is not on the part of the district, but it's been the failure of the state to bring forward a bond since 2010. That's actually what created the issue of the outdated eligibility. You know, past practice prior to 2010, if state bonds were exhausted, district applications were processed still in a normal fashion, and we waited for the next round of funding. I don't see any reason not to continue with this. And when we talk about local bonds, one of the main items that any district does before going out for a local bond is we make sure that we go through and we assess the needs of the district. And so those needs we address, we put numbers to, we look at those, and that's what we put together before we actually go out for a bond. And I think in this case, that's why we still need to be accepting applications and processing those through. We have to show what the true need is of the state prior to going out for this next bond. And I think it's just good practice, again, just as we do with our local bonds. We make sure that our taxpayers and those voting for our local bonds know what our true need is and what we think that cost is at that time. So that's why I would ask that the state continue to accept applications. Again, doing the same thing. We know we're past what we have available to spend, but in order to truly show what that next bond is, or however we go for that next sustainable funding that we'd like to get to, we still have to have an assessment of the actual state needs of what districts are bringing in, and that funding-wise. And the fourth item I want to talk about is the expired state agency approval. And, with the recession of 2009, the state didn't sell bonds in order to make timely apportionments. Once we came back into that, funding came available, both DSA and CDE really have gone out of their way and worked with districts to make sure any expired approvals were actually worked forward as best they could. And we really think that OPSC can work with districts in the same manner on the eligibility and agency approvals. I think, again, it's a teamwork. We're working with our other partners of DSA and CDE and our partner of OPSC with districts, coming in to make sure that we keep our projects that may not have gone forward, waiting for funding, that we keep them moving forward and rolling instead of sending them back. So I really think, and we've mentioned before, when we say that our eligibility might be different, again, with some of the recession, some of our students have moved to other districts, or else they have actually relocated out of state. But that still doesn't mean we don't have need. Even if our eligibility goes down a little, the difference of having 30 students in the classroom and 25, we still need a classroom for 25 students. So that's something to remember. It's not like all of it has gone away. So it's very important with it. And I really think our California schools should be the best place to care for and develop our students' growth from kinder to adulthood. We want to make sure our schools are safe. I can't tell you the amount of emails I'm getting from parents who are so concerned of how our kids will be safe in their schools. They want to make sure when their kids walk in that classroom, they're going to come home that day all in one piece. So we have to make sure that these funds and our bond funds keep going, because we have We need to make sure that our hardware, we can lock down our schools. Not only all of our PA systems are in working order for emergency, all of our phone systems work, all of our fire alarms work. These are all things that are desperately needed as our schools age. Sometimes, and you say, oh, well, you should be doing routine maintenance. Sometimes systems age out. We have fire alarm systems that we're trying to replace. You can't get parts for anymore. So the entire system has to replace, and that's a huge undertaking for most schools. So, and in closing, I just want to let you know that, again, my name is Julie Arthur. I'm with Palm Springs Unified School District, as I didn't mention at the beginning of it, so I apologize. But I'm also vice chair to CASH, which is Coalition for Adequate School Housing. And I want to let you know that CASH and school districts, we stand ready to assist OPSC staff in any way possible to keep improving the SFP program and making it better for all of us. So, thank you.
I guess by virtue of the pattern that's been established, that puts me next. And so Brett Mitchell, I'm Director of Facilities, right next door, San Juan Unified School District. Glad to be here. I'm so glad that you invited us this to be informal, because I'm nowhere near a skilled orator, or am I good at arguing the fine points of the law, but I'm so glad that you all did. If you don't mind, I would really, since we're neighbors here in our district, I'd like to talk about this in a manner that's more relational, because I do feel like we've had a great partnership in our district for a long time with OPSC, worked really well together, and I'm a bit of a storyteller, so if you'll forgive me, I sometimes tell stories, but I remember one time I had a new pastor come to our church, and he didn't like pianos, he wanted a keyboard, and so he moved the piano out the day he showed up, and guess what, the next day his office was filled with the ladies in the church saying, how could you move our piano? So what he did was this. Every day he moved that piano 1 inch closer across the stage, until at one point during a performance it was outside the door, and it was then gone, so it moved slowly. And as it moved slowly out the door, it was missed less. And when I thought about stopping the applications, I thought, boy, I hope when you hear they're closing the program, it felt to me a little bit like we're just moving the piano slowly on this. It's just a small step towards what could be. And so that's why I wanted to really jump in and say, listen, how can we partner with you further? What can we do? Trying to walk a little bit of a mile in your shoes. I could imagine being on OPSC staff and Brian to my right here thinking, why should I continue this work on applications if there's no bonding authority? I get that. But the significant part of that on our side is really in the past when we've heard about bonds and whether or not the governor's going to sell the bonds, we've heard about inventory. And my question is, how do we keep inventory? It's been nice because I've been able to say, look at what I've got. In very simple terms, I'm continuing my applications and I'm saying, look at what I got. And we're developing a backlog that really is a message to the state that, hey, we've got an inventory, it keeps coming, this is not going to stop. And so that's another component that I think, again, just relationally and as it appears real surfacey, we're helping you, in a sense, communicate our inventory. So the other part of it is I've been very fortunate in our district. We've been one of the districts fortunate enough to pass bonds, local bonds, Prop 39, and we appreciate that legislation and ability. But I've been very lucky, and I'm always asked in my oversight committee of what are you doing besides just local taxpayer? What efforts are you making? And we are proud to say we've left no stone unturned. If it's money that's available, we're going after it. And part of that means I'm able to say we've submitted applications everywhere there's eligibility. We're in. I'm contemplating my next meeting and saying they're no longer taking applications. I can't put, we know there's eligibility there, but I can't file an application any longer at OPSC. And really perpetuating that message, how does that resonate back with our stakeholders? So it's just a tough message that we'll have to send that I hope we won't have to. The only thing, and they were so good about talking about the fine points of law, the only thing that I would potentially add to it, and my expert's in the audience so he can correct me, but I think that I made a note that the discontinuing the eligibility may affect my ability to levy level 2 and 3 developer fees, and that's going to hurt. So with that, I will say From past, thank you for the great experience that we've had with OPSC. It has really been a good experience. This smarts a little bit, and I'm hoping that you'll reconsider. Not just based on the fine points of the law, but also just the merits of the relationship. So that's it for me. Thank you.
I'll follow suit here. So first of all, thank you. My name is Alan Rising. I'm the Executive Director of Facilities for Long Beach Unified School District. I'm also a CASH board member. And so first of all, thank you for allowing us to come in here today and talk to you about these very important changes that are being proposed here. The first item I just kind of want to speak to quickly is some concerns that I have about the process, the urgency and the transparency of the process. It seems that with the goal that's been discussed of adopting these, or at least presenting these regulations to the State Allocations Board in August, it doesn't give us a lot of time to really conduct these type of stakeholder engagement meetings. If we just reflect back in the last time that we addressed this same topic, when we set up the special subcommittee for facilities, it took us more than 4 months to go through this same discussion with really the same thing. And I do question that we did this work. It just seems to me that this work has been completed back in 2012 when we came up with a viable resolution to the very, very same issue. So I just asked the question of, please reconsider that work that was done, and let's look back to what was done back in 2012. I will say that we agree that there probably could be some tweaks to that process that would be open for discussion. The school community, as Mr. Ulrich had said, the school community is open for discussions. We're open to make some adjustments to the program and have that open dialogue as we move forward, just to consider some of the work that was done in 2012. The question that you proposed about why is this considered to be a closing of the program? As it's been said previously, failing or stopping accepting applications really turns the back on the need. It really doesn't quantify and properly categorize what the need is at our school districts. It really very much, as a practitioner of this, it appears that the state is really turning the back on districts that out there and have a very real and current need at school sites, and really turning the back on what we consider to be the state's vested obligation to support schools moving forward as part of the Constitution. That schools should be one of the top funded issues at the state level. So if we can't quantify those needs moving forward, it really puts us in a precarious situation to even lobby and make a case for why there might need to be a future state bond. And as was previously said, being able to show that need and being able to show that there are applications out there and that there is the need, the support from the state required for school districts to be able to do what we do on a daily basis. So the other issue I want to bring up, I'm not going to recant some of the other things that were said, but is talk a little bit about school security. It was mentioned earlier by Julie Arthur about the issue of school security. Many schools are struggling with the need for school security. The state program, in many cases, the only viable way that they can come up with the funds necessary to make the improvements at our school sites in order to keep our students and our staff safe. Just my district alone, Long Beach Unified, our initial effort with security at our school sites, we're going to spend more than $11 million of local resources to do that. Many school districts don't have that type of resource, and they have to rely on the state program to properly plan for that as part of their modernization and reconstruction programs that they do at their school sites. So really not accepting applications and not continuing the school facilities program moving forward puts many districts at a disadvantage to just basic raw security at school sites to allow students to learn in a safe and secure environment. And again, not accepting those applications just doesn't allow school districts to properly plan for how much support they're going to be able to get at the state level, really relying on that state partnership. I'm going to keep my comments very brief because I think most of the items were discussed, but I really would like to go back and just say let's look back at that work that we did in 2012 and why are we recreating that on such a short timeline when we already have those regulations in place. We already have the processes in place for what to do when we run out of money with the current bond and be able to prepare us for future bonds that we would look to the state to support us. So thank you very much for the ability to come in and speak today.
Thank you. And it's a listening day, so we're not planning on commenting too much, but I did want to just touch on Julie's point with respect to the SFP and clarify for those that maybe haven't had an opportunity to read the item, but we are not, in the item, we are not suggesting that the SFP should be scrapped, and in the item, we're not intending to suggest any specific changes. What we were trying to highlight is that there have been conversations in the past about the program moving forward, and the examples that were provided in there came from past subcommittee discussions. So OPSC is not currently taking a position on where we should be moving forward. And we are not intending in this item to suggest that the SFP should go any particular direction. So I just wanted to clarify that point, and thank you for raising that that may have been interpreted from the item. So that was not our intent, and we will definitely take a look at how that is written. So thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you very much.
Oops. Who's that?
Come on, Corinne.
I'll let you start. I'll let you start. We'll go left to right. No, I'm happy to go. We'll go left to right.
Right. She says we're going to go left to right, so that's what we'll do. Well, that's it. I'm Debbie Pearson. I'm the Executive Director for Small School Districts for California. First of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate the attention that you gave to the small school districts in your write-up by acknowledging the difficulties that they face in accessing the current problem. I think it goes a little bit deeper than what Julie had mentioned before, but stopping the process, I think, will only perpetuate that difficulty that they have. And I think that the 4 items, and I won't go into them because they covered them earlier, but the 4 items that you addressed, I think could be somewhat alleviated if OPSC would staff up and more quickly process current applications because they get stuck. The workshops that you've done for the outreach is a great start to helping these folks. The difficulty that happens with small schools is, unlike the larger districts, they don't have facilities people. So I think if they could get further help from OPSC, it would speed things up for them because they're the superintendent, they're the principal, sometimes the teacher, and then now they are the facilities person. And you become that, as I experienced when I was a superintendent building a school. I became a facilities person for about 3 years. And a lot of districts, they just do not have the support. So as a result, that gets put on the back burner. So I appreciate that start off with the workshops, and I know that some of them were well attended, and I would like to see those continue. But I would encourage you to reconsider the proposal to stop accepting applications when the bond authority is exhausted, because I think it makes it more difficult to pass bonds, future bonds, as there's not going to be any evidence for a need if you don't track applications. I think that the current proposal sends a very clear message that the state is no longer interested in being a partner in the school facilities program to all of its districts. So I would just ask that you just reconsider and once again acknowledge, and I appreciate you recognizing the plight of small school districts, that they do need more help.
Hi. Sean Atlow, Los Angeles Unified School District. And we also want to start by thanking you for pulling this meeting together so quickly. We value opportunities to work with stakeholders on topics related to the school facility program. I want to start by saying when we saw the item, frankly, we were disappointed that something so significant would be taken to the SAB before stakeholders were invited to, or without inviting stakeholders to participate in its development. I think for decades, we've been successful in working together to create programs, change programs, build schools, create great facilities for our students, and it feels very much like the state no longer wants to be a partner in that process. The item itself also caused us some concern. There are many factors that go into whether or not school districts file applications. While I can't speak to why small districts may or may not do it, I can say LAUSD, the largest in the state, didn't file any applications during the period that OPSC wasn't processing them. So we didn't have a single project on the acknowledged list, and the rationale in the item suggested that we would have the most. And so size is probably not what's driving a school district's decision to file. There are many things going into it, and we think it's important that OPSC pull experts in to try to understand that better, especially when the outcome is to suggest that to create equity, we stop moving forward with at least the receipts of applications. And you've heard also from others that having a list of applications at the very least is important so that it can demonstrate need. It's not just need for state funding, though. At the local level, having a list like that or having a program that exists also signals to our constituents, our local constituents, that we have partners, and that when we try to push forward our local bonds, we're not necessarily going it alone. And for LAUSD, the state has been our best partner. We access funding programs from all over, including the federal government, but the state has been our best contributor to our program. And so for the state to say we're no longer going to receive applications tells our constituents, well, maybe your best partner is no longer available, and maybe we shouldn't continue to invest locally in schools. We were also a little shocked, I guess, by the specifics of the justification in the item. It seemed that OPSC was trying to suggest that more than 50% of program funds should go to small school districts. It looked to us, just using the data that was in the item, that small school districts might have been getting more than a proportionate share of the funds based on enrollment, which we would say is probably most appropriate. We certainly don't think more than half of the funds should be going to the smallest districts, since they have less than 10% of enrollment. But we look forward to opportunities to work with the state and other stakeholders to try to find out what would be fair for everyone. We did do some of our own analysis to try to look for what might be a better approach. And one thing we found was that many of the small school districts in the state only have 1 or 2 schools, and it may mean that they have no need for program funds at all. And so some of what OPSC may have been seeing in the data may not suggest inequity as much as they don't need the program funds, or they can't qualify for the program funds, or they've already accessed the program funds that they needed. And so we just think there's a lot more that needs to go into an exercise like this one, and we would very much like to work with everyone throughout the state, the stakeholders, to try to find a good solution. As for possible options, our preference would be for the state to continue to accept and process applications. We're not fans of the acknowledged list, partly because it costs so much to file an application, only to have it sit in a room for several years. So our preference would be, if you're going to stop or end the acknowledged list, that you go back to maintaining the true unfunded list and continue to process. But we are open to any options that anyone wants to put forth.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Turner. I work for Mendocino County Office of Education, and I'm here representing the 12 districts and about 15,000 students in our county. And I'm not as eloquent a speaker as the rest you've heard this morning, so I'm going to read to you the comments that I wrote for this meeting. So we all want the best education for our children, no matter where we live. Many studies have documented that the condition and adequacy of facilities either supports or inhibits the educational success of students and the performance of their teachers. Our governor has often stated that he believes local communities are responsible for setting local educational priorities, which includes funding local school facilities. However, the state continuously adds regulations and requirements dictating how schools are built and maintained, which add extra mandated costs. A partial list includes prevailing wages, contracting requirements, geotechnical surveys, and the evolving Field Act requirements. Not only that, schools must then pay fees to the state to verify that the district's state licensed professionals are conforming to the additional state requirements. So these state mandates, which by law have priority, add a significant cost to construction. When we look closely at communities across the state, we see a tremendous range of property values and a corresponding range of those communities' ability to pay for school facilities. Many are able to provide rich learning environments in addition to meeting the state requirements. However, many rural and poor communities find themselves housing their students and teachers in far less than ideal settings. I believe the state has an obligation to provide a basic level of facility funding to offset those mandated facility costs, which exacerbate this economic disparity. As you know, there are many upfront costs required before a district may apply for state bond funds. Design professionals must be hired, often surveyors and geotechnical engineers as well. Several state agency approvals must be secured, and DSA must approve the construction plans, all prior to submitting a funding request to OPSC. After the previous bond funds were fully committed, schools continued to submit applications which were placed on the acknowledged list with the hope of receiving future state funding. The need to preserve our existing facilities and accommodate student population growth continued, despite the lack of an immediate bond measure. The fact that many districts would bear the cost of submitting an application to the acknowledged list is a true representation of the unmet facility funding needs in California. However, the list probably only represents the tip of the iceberg of the true need. Eliminating the list will further mask the underfunding of school infrastructure and delay continued bond support, accelerating the degradation of school facilities and our children's education. On behalf of the Mendocino County Superintendent of Schools and the schools in Mendocino County, I implore you to withdraw this proposal to change the regulations. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Corinne Loscott with Corinne Loscott Consulting, and I'm a consultant that does school facilities funding and planning for school districts throughout California. And I'm here on behalf of our school districts that are concerned about this proposal. They share the concerns that have been expressed to date. And we also very much appreciate all of the hard work that the OPSC staff has done, particularly in being here today and all of the years of effort and expertise that you, Barbara, and Michael have provided in preparing the applications that have come before you. The districts that I represent have benefited with millions of dollars to improve their school and add to their school, and we appreciate that very much, and we want very much to have them participate in that for years to come. So the districts are concerned about the negative impacts to the SFP resulting from the proposed regulations. While the intended consequence may not be to dismantle the program, the unintended consequences do indeed dismantle the program. They dismantle it because there are districts that have projects that aren't in DSA that are being planned. They take a long time to plan big projects. If they are not in DSA today and they are new construction projects, it is not envisioned that that project would be an application that would receive, that would be submitted to OPSC before new construction funding is exhausted. So you have an example right there that the message to that district is your project that is not in DSA, that might be a building addition, a portable addition, a new school, is something that you have to envision funding yourself, or we don't know what to tell that district if this proposal moves forward, because there is no opportunity to file that application if this moves forward. That is the message that those districts are getting from this proposal. So when you're thinking about the comment you're hearing about they feel that this is shutting down the program for that kind of application, and there are many like that, that is where that's coming from. So further to the point of not understanding why we think that this is shutting down the program, we don't know how and when the OPSC staff can calculate when state funding will have been exhausted. And this is because those of us that study the workload list, we might look at a funding application value on the workload list and see that the grant calculation that shows up on the workload list is a simple calculation of the amount of grants that were on the application, 5004 form, multiplied by the grant value, and you have that value shown there. But it isn't processed. When you put that grant value on the application or on the workload list, it hasn't been scrutinized. It is possible that that application may be ineligible. It may not be qualified. It may be qualified for more money than is shown on the workload list. So our concern is that the workload list may significantly understate or overstate the amount of money that is really in demand on the authorization. So your queue may not last till December 2018, or it may last a lot longer. There is no way to predict from the workload list accurately. So our concern is using the workload list to try to estimate the exhaustion level. And I don't know if OPSC can respond to how that might be measured for the exhaustion level, but it's an important point for those of us that hear that you're going to determine when you're going to stop applications based on the level of exhaustion, because you don't process them until the point when you think you have bond money. So I'm not sure how that catch-22 works. Further to that point, if you are not processing all the applications and you're trying to determine when the money is exhausted, if you don't process them, how about the scenario where you have an underestimation? What happens when there is more money? And then how do you develop a queue to deal with any monies that might become available? So that just points out the benefit of having an acknowledged list or a true unfunded list. And then the final point I wanted to bring up is that you had something that I always refer to as an insufficiency resolution that was required with every application. The school board had to provide this with each application. The insufficiency resolution had extensive wording in there that relieved the SAB of any obligation. It had the school board acknowledge that there was no guarantee of funding, and this was an item that was required with each funding application right up until January 2017. It had to come into OPSC with the 5004 form, and only with the passage of Prop 51 was that no longer required. So this tool served to relieve the state of all perceived obligations. And so I'm wondering why, at the very least, would this not be something that the state would use as an alternative to ceasing acceptance of applications? So I could go on, but there are other people that probably wish to speak, and I thank you all for your time.
Just a quick comment, Corinne, that was kind of my fault. We talked about the queue of the list and how that works. We've talked about that internally too, that based on the workload list, we are guessing when on the October 2008 for new construction, for example. We think that by the time regulations are approved, we'll actually have a queue that's already generated from those projects. And also what we've talked about in the item is health and safety projects. We get several every single month, and because they get first priority, and we process those applications first, we think we'll always have a buffer that we get so many new health and safety, and now with seismic being expanded, that we will get enough applications to use any returning bond at the rate of the program that we will have a built-in queue on the natural on the back end.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek, or good morning. My name is Derek Lennox, and I'm here on behalf of the Capistrano Unified School District. First off, I want to thank the State Allocation Board and OPSC for putting together this stakeholder engagement process. As a stakeholder, you know, we work with a lot of state agencies and the legislature along the way, and our general experience as advocates on behalf of schools is that it really makes a big difference when we feel like, you know, our comments are being heard, that they're taken into consideration, and in general makes better policy. So big thank you for that. We appreciate this opportunity. You've heard a lot about the big picture here today, about how districts feel about this type of proposal and what the experience is going to be statewide in terms of, demonstrating demand and so forth. What I want to express to you today on behalf of Capistrano is how it will affect them locally. So at the local level, the district has really been working on raising that local revenue in order to meet its demand. It's a district pretty large, 53,000 students. And for those 53,000 students, there is an eligibility at the state for over $250 million. So needless to say, even when they're able to, work with their voters and get that local matching share as well, it's going to be no small lift to get all those projects done, and needless to say, there's no way they can get it done without that partnership from the state. So bringing it back to today's conversation, changing the rules at this late point in the game is going to be a really challenging thing for a district like Capistrano and certainly many others in the room who have been planning for years to do their local matching share, but also years to do their master plan and figure out what they need, and to now find out that this one, seemingly small rule will be tweaked. It's actually a really big deal for the district because it plays into, can they get it done in the first place? So if anything, I think that the exhaustion of Prop 51 dollars does provide evidence of something. I don't think that that something is the need to stop accepting applications. If any, I think it's evidence of the need to process the applications we have as quickly as possible, to get the money out there to schools. And if we in the agency world, the legislature, the stakeholder community, all feel that there is a need for a more equitable program with better rules that's incorporating what we've learned over the past 20 years about what works best, that's the time to do that. But to start changing course without a new direction doesn't seem like the right solution to us at this point. So thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Kaplan. I'm an 18-year attorney, but I am also the former Assistant Executive Officer for the State Allocation Board and former Chair of the Implementation Committee. I am also a delegate for the California School Board Association and Chair of the Nominating Committee for the California School Board Association. So I work with districts. I am a board member, and my expertise is I work in and around school facilities. So I'm using all of my knowledge today in my crosshairs. And I've had the pleasure of working with you, Barbara, Michael, Brian, and we used to have an implementation committee, and we did really, really good work. Hello, we did priorities and funding. We were able to make a major shift working with all stakeholders to come forward of something. So I know when we work together and we get feedback from experts in the field, we can make changes to the program that address some of the concerns that have been brought up. I mean, we dealt with financial hardship and made changes to the program. We did environmental regulation changes. We even, I chaired the audit subcommittee, which it took 10 years, but our recommendations from the audit subcommittee finally came together and were approved by the governor this year. So there has been a very, very long past of working together, and you guys are inside, so you have the inside knowledge. But there are those of us who are either board members or work in facilities or build these schools and work with districts that actually know on the ground the real impact that I hope that OPSC will first and foremost, let's reconstitute the implementation committee. I mean, Debbie was on there many years ago, Sean, LAUSD, there. We still have these experts that can work together to come up with ideas instead of stopping the program. We have the ability to fix the program, and it's been shown by past work. My concern as we look at this, because I am also an attorney, the unintended consequences of lawsuits that could potentially be presented to the State Allocation Board by unknowingly moving forward this. You potentially have level 3 triggers. You potentially have severe hardship impacts, William Stiles lawsuit, Serrano versus Priest, disproportionality and disparity. That there's unintended consequences open up that door. And then I want to talk locally as a school board member. Our taxpayers expect when we go out for a bond And that expectation has been there since 1998. And that's now, if you were a voter in 1998, you're the main voter we're going towards to help us fund and vote for school construction bonds. If there is no ability to tell our local taxpayers, we are working with the state on matching funds, school bonds will start tanking. If you can't, because every single bond I see throughout the state of California talks about potential matching funds that they may be able to access. Taxpayers rely on that. They expect that from us as local board members. And my concern is not about areas that pass bonds, but what about the areas that don't? And then that falls back into Williams and Serrano, the disproportionality, the inequality that we're looking at, small school districts, urban school districts that have severe needs of even new roofing, air conditioning, you name it, we're putting them out to dry on the hook and hanging them. And in effect, we're hurting those kids in their education. So I know you may think that's a stretch, but the first thing kids learn and work in is a facilities, and a healthy, regulated temperature facility increases learning automatically. And I would hate to have OPSC be the leader in unintentionally stopping this program, which prevents boards from passing bonds. Thank you.
Hi, Darren Waters, Deputy Superintendent of Valverde Unified down in Riverside County. Thank you for taking this time today with us. I really appreciate the opportunity to provide some input. I believe a needs list is needed. We're going to need to be able to evaluate, justify, and size any future bonds. And without that list, we're not going to really have, I don't believe, a good understanding of what that need really is. From a practitioner's perspective in a school district, I also need to know that where I'm at on a list, even I can see a value and see where I'm at, so I can plan for the future. Because it's so far out from the time that we start thinking about, oh my God, we got these kids coming, and I got to build a new school, and where am I going to do it? I'm working years before you see anything from us on trying to plan that. It gives a little certainty if I can look at that list and say, and tell my board that, hey, look, we need to get moving now because the list is filling up and we're 7 years out or 4 years out or whatever it is. Just, it helps us know if I'm going to have that school or when I'll have participation from the state to help build that school. And also, what is my local participation going to have to be in a situation I'm dealing with right now where I've had to front the money, not me, but our local bond has had to front the state's portion at the cost of other projects. So we'd like to see that list continue. A couple comments on the staff report. Equitable access. There's some great charts on there talking about the dollars that have gone on enrollment. But really, I think it's a little misleading to me, and maybe I was missing something. If staff could take a look at dollars per student for those districts or students per project, because if I'm building an elementary school for 1,000 kids and my neighbor's building it at a small school district for 100, yeah, I'm going to spend more money. It's going to cost more money to do mine, but are we satisfying the needs of both of us? And the answer would be yes. But the more dollars would be going to that larger district. So just a deeper analysis that might be beneficial. On the topic of the future enhancements, we need to consider the impact of areas with low assessed valuation. Riverside County has some very low assessed valuations per student. It's very difficult for us to get our local matches together, even when the program is functioning without a hitch. Without state participation, our high growth areas with low AV will not be able to house students. Eligibility, again, the analysis talked about in their staff report about the first 50 applications and how the eligibility changed for all these different schools. And that didn't surprise me. Enrollment projections are exactly that. They're projections. And enrollment projections, those of us that are in this business know they're exactly wrong. We try to do the best we can, but they're going to be wrong. It's just you just try to minimize that spread on how wrong you are. So those first 50 are from the, 2012, 2013 timeline. I mean, that's getting back pretty far. So I would anticipate a lot of those districts would have a significant change in their enrollment projections and consequently their eligibility. So it was a little, to me, again, a little bit of grabbing a low-hanging fruit, not really looking at that full load of projects that are in there. Expired approvals is a problem I've had to work through my district, and it is a challenge. And I don't know if there's something we can do to administratively or through regulations to alleviate some of that, but it's certainly something I would agree with staff. This is a problem that will need to be solved going forward. Thank you.
Yes, hello. Richard Lyon here today on behalf of the California Building Industry Association, consultant to CBIA. In a prior life, 20 years ago, I represented the home building industry in the discussions that ultimately became Senate Bill 50. The proposal to limit or to stop altogether applications to the state program is of deep concern to us. We think that it has ripple effects, policy impacts that go deep into the program and that have not been either adequately addressed or completely understood. The architecture of the school facility program is, as others have indicated, a shared partnership. And districts are part of that partnership. They can decide whether or not they participate in the state program. If they do, they have to live by the rules of the program. But the benefits they get is they get access to state funding, and they also get to charge higher than normal developer impact fees. In the new construction context, builders pay fees to mitigate their impacts. That's been, constitutional law for decades. And you will normally do a constitutionally required nexus analysis to determine what the appropriate fees are for your impact. In the school facility context, and that is called a level 1 fee. When the school facility program was put together and the shared partnership was agreed to, builders agreed to not only pay the level 1 fee, but we agreed to go far beyond that. We agreed that if the districts were not able to come up with the local match to match the state's portion, that we would be there to backstop the districts to ensure that they are able to provide the match so that they can participate in the state program. That's the way the program is operated. It's been a good program. We believe in it, and we're more than happy to continue that process. In order for a district to be able to go beyond level 1 and charge a level 2 fee, they have to actively participate in the state program. They have to submit timely applications to the state, and those applications have to be accepted. If applications are not able to be made to the state, if the process or the spigot is shut off, then there's a real legitimate issue out there about whether districts would have the legal authority to go to the so-called 50% level 2 fee. We aren't arguing that we want that shut off. We aren't saying, great, let's limit fees. We are more than prepared to pay those fees. We point out, though, that pulling administratively, going in and trying to surgically address something as fundamental to the state program as applications has policy impacts that ripple throughout the program, and they have real severe policy impacts in terms of districts being able to ensure that the match is there so that they can participate in the state program. So in prior years, before SB 50, the program was fraught with litigation, with strife. There was a lot of litigation that went on between school districts and builders. Over the past 20 years, that has pretty much been tamped down. A little flare up here or there, but we've all lived under the rules of the program because we believe in the partnership and we believe in the equities that the SB 50 provided for the funding partners. So we see the application proposal by OPSC as upsetting that and having ripple effects that we think are really policy issues that need to be addressed by the legislature.
Good morning, Barbara. Michael and Brian, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Lindsay Currier. I'm with the Riverside County Office of Education. And along with Steve from Mendocino County, I too will comment this morning on maintaining a list of applications from the county office perspective. Because county offices do not have the authority to issue local school bonds, the school facility program is critical to our efforts to construct and renovate classrooms. The list in turn allows county offices to demonstrate to our districts that we are ready to move forward on joint construction projects where we are building an inclusive site and serving our students in their least restricted environments. Almost by default, county offices require financial hardship assistance. The list allows financial hardship projects to begin the planning process and reserve a place in line for when funding becomes available for site acquisition, design, and construction funding. Planning and designing a project and obtaining the needed local and state agency approvals can take many years. Eliminating the list would remove an important component of local project planning. To do so would disadvantage our projects, putting them further behind applicants with greater access to local resources. Hardship projects would then struggle to compete with the submittals that would occur once funding becomes available and applications are again being received. We are not asking for OPSC staff to conduct a complete funding application review or certify that the program will remain the same or guarantee that projects will receive funding when it becomes available. We are simply asking OPSC to keep a list of applications in date order received. For these reasons, we will continue to recommend that the list be maintained, and we will respectfully oppose the proposal if and when it is brought to the State Allocation Board in August. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Hilbert Contreras. I'm the Chief Facilities and Operations Officer for Dublin Unified School District. As many of you know, Dublin Unified School District is one of the most impacted school districts in the state. We currently educate approximately 11,600 students in our 11 schools, despite having facilities for capacity for only 10,200. With a deficit of over 1,000 spaces, we anticipate an additional growth of 2,000 students over the next 5 years. And for these reasons, Dublin Unified has identified the need for construction of new schools and the modernization and expansion of existing schools, which total over $600 million. We have done all in our power to increase our facilities capacity, including by maximizing our developer fees, regularly negotiating agreements with developers, and passing multiple local school bonds. Despite our efforts, the district's ability to rely on local funds for facilities projects is extremely limited, as Dublin Unified is currently at 111% of its bonding capacity. Dublin has always done all it can to take its place in line for state funding for facilities. This includes the steps needed to plan ahead for the next round of state funding when state funds are not available. Currently, we have 8 projects in line for funding for new construction and modernization. Those projects total approximately $72 million. One application has been online since September of 2014. The SAB proposed action is a direct threat to Dublin Unified, as it will thwart our efforts to plan ahead for state funding, resulting in undue strain upon Dublin's already limited capacity to raise and use further local funds. Contrary to the findings in the OPSC staff report, the applications received beyond authority list allows large and small districts alike to anticipate future state funding and to plan ahead. To suddenly end the current program and potentially substituting a new system, which a place in line no longer matters, would impact our district greatly. Given that we have already expanded substantial sums in obtaining the required approvals for projects in the hope of eventually receiving state funding. By no longer accepting applications, the OPSC would be punishing districts like Dublin Unified, who spent the time and resources to plan ahead and in seeking funding for the state through the SFP, and potentially rewarding those that have not. The underlying need that the establishment of the applications received beyond the authority list in 2012 has not diminished. In addition to securing district's place in line, the list serves to demonstrate the ongoing facility needs in the state by creating a system whereby the SAB could track projects in between bond measure. The list also serves to tell the story of school facilities needs in California, factoring into considerations of whether and when a new state bond measure would be needed. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Miller. I am the board president for Dublin Unified School District. I'm also a delegate to CSBA, and I just want to say that I really appreciate having the stakeholder input meeting. We were here and attended a lot of state allocation board meetings and met with OPSC during the whole conversation about developer 3 fees, and I felt that our voices were heard, and so I feel very hopeful being here and having you take this input. I know it's meaningful, so I just wanted to say I appreciate that. And I'm not going to repeat a bunch of the statistics. I'm going to sort of give you what it's like being a trustee in a city where our growth needs are exponential. We're second fastest growing city in the state. We keep growing almost a school a year, in students, and we've really struggled. We've done everything that has been asked of us. We have passed over $600 million in bonds. We have sat down with developers over and over. We have many mitigation agreements in place. Our city has done something unprecedented in partnership with us, and they have actually given us 2 parcels of land, both 12 acres. One, we're opening a K-8 school in the fall, didn't have to pay for that land, only had to pay for construction, and they just gave us another one that we have up to 10 years to build another K-8 school. And so we have really work together as a city with constituents, but what's happened because of the lack of state funds, and we've had to defer projects that we promised our constituents when they voted on bond measures to build new schools, to open schools, because we just don't have seats. I mean, we just have kids coming so quickly. And what it's done is has literally divided our city in two. We have recall efforts going. We have people running on campaigns where all they want to do, I mean, they're insistent that the developers should fully be funding schools, and we know that's not going to happen. We understand the law, we understand the constraints, and it's a three-way partnership. We've always considered the state our third leg of our facilities funding, and so when you talk about, why do you think this is ending facilities funding? For us, like Bert said, we've been in line since 2014 for $28.8 million on a school that we built, deferring projects, borrowing money, and we do these things strategically, knowing that if we take out a ban, that we'll have bond issuance later on to repay it somehow if we have to front cash on a project. And I think it's my understanding for new construction, if you are actually occupying the building, like you've actually moved in and you start utilizing the building, you no longer meet the eligibility to apply. So if you take away the ability for us to get in line, we may be occupying that brand new building before we even get to submit an application, depending on what happens with the state facilities program. So it actually would eliminate our ability to even collect matching funds on that, and that's really concerning for us. I mean, honestly, this gives us an ability to plan and be strategic, and it's not that, we say we know we're in line, we know at some point we'll get this apportionment, we don't know when, but at least we can sort of plan for it. If we don't have that ability, first of all, in Dublin, our constituents that live there now, they're not going to pass any more bonds. I mean, I think those days are over. They literally are recalling people because we don't have a second high school. Even though we're getting ready to build one, it didn't happen as quickly as they wanted to. I mean, this whole program is kind of holding us together and at least giving us the ability to say, no, we are going to build new schools. We are going to modernize our old schools. I think, you asked about proposing solutions, and I hadn't thought about that before I came. One of the things I could say is really just a reform of the school facilities program. I think it's worked for a lot of people, but I think the one-size-fits-all sort of formulaic way of being, and I know the developers might not agree with me, but level 2 and level 3, like we fought to collect level 3 fees, and then we got sued by the developers for collecting level 3 fees. So we really didn't collect very many. We ended up settling or going back to level 2. If those fees go away, like our level 2 fees that are supposed to meet 50% of construction costs, they don't. And level 3 is supposed to meet 100%, they don't. They might in a city where it's not $2 or $3 million an acre for land, or the construction costs are lower, but the one-size-fits-all formula in the school facilities program doesn't meet the needs of the students in Dublin, and that's who I'm speaking for. So I'm not saying it's a bad program. I think it's definitely been a great program, and I'm grateful for it. But I think in terms of a proposed solution, I would suggest maybe looking at some reform where it's more individualized per area, per district, something. I know that's a lot of work, but I'm not really sure how that would look. And then the other thing I just want to say is that depending on how this goes, and I'm not exactly sure how to read it, but I mean, I could get our whole city up here, for the next state allocation board meeting. And I feel pretty confident that you are all good listeners. I mean, I experienced that already once. So I think there's been a lot of people here. We all seem to be on the same side except for one, entity. And I just don't know. And I guess, and I'll just say it, I mean, the rumors are, this is what we hear as trustees, and this is what we're all talking about, that the governor doesn't want anything to do with state facilities funding anymore. And I think that's why we all had this knee-jerk reaction that you're getting rid of the program. So I think that was the impetus for us to all come up here, and I think that's what we're thinking. But also in terms of all the unintended consequences of not having the list. I think that's the most important thing, regardless of what the governor's intentions are or not. But that's kind of why we all freaked out, because that's what we're hearing. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.
Good morning, and good morning to those directly behind me. It's kind of ominous to have two people sit behind you as you speak. My name is Thomas Pace. I am the proud Facilities Director for the San Bernardino City Unified School District. I wanted to give you some background on our city, and I think it's germane to the topic because I think that the proposed changes are going to have a drastic impact on our city. We service over 55,000 students, 5,000 of which by definition are homeless. The poverty rate of San Bernardino is over 30%. We have the highest crime rate in the state. We have gone through terrorist attacks, bankruptcy, school shootings. To say that our need is great is an understatement. Over the past 13 years, we've invested over $1 billion of capital funds in our schools. 13 years ago, our grad rate was just a tick under 60%. If you think about that, every year 12,000 students are in our high schools. When you think about 2,000 students each year not graduating, that's pretty sad. 13 years later, after our capital investment in students, our grad rate is over 90%. We know there is a direct correlation for capitalization of students in their performance in the classroom. Our students, I'm a proud water polo coach in San Bernardino. The students I have believe that their schools are lighthouses in turbulent waters. They don't want to go home. Practice would end, they would stay on campus. The acceptance of applications is hope to a community that needs to rebuild. I often joke that I'm the largest developer in San Bernardino. There is no other development in San Bernardino outside of our schools. These schools provide hope, and by turning off the spigot, by turning off the acceptance of these applications, you are turning off the hope of a community. You are turning a back on some of the most neediest of your constituents. What was it, 5 years ago we passed our last local bond with a participation of over 80%. For a community that struggles to feed its students, to clothe its students, they passed a bond for $250 million with the anticipation of state aid. By saying you're no longer accepting applications, you will diminish my opportunity to sell future bonds. You will crush our hopes of obtaining level 2 developer fees or higher. We anticipate on growing over 11,000 units in the next 10 years. By not collecting the highest level developer fee, you will be impacting financially one of the state's neediest communities. I appreciate the time. We appreciate you listening. And thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us here today. My name is Julie Kissel. I'm the Director of Facilities for the Chico Unified School District. Chico is about 2 hours north of here. We're 13,000 students, so we're not large, we're not small, we're kind of in the middle. We're growing and we're thriving. We have 21 schools. Our facilities master plan identifies over $400 million of identified facility needs. We passed Measure E, a local bond in our area in 2012, actually a tax extension, and Measure K in 2016, with the promise that we would do the hard work of leveraging those funds with every potential source that we could pursue that with, the state being our major partner. We were able to modernize our high schools, working along with our partner at OPSC and DSA to really improve our schools for our high school students. When we developed our facilities master plan, we had the intention of tackling our junior high schools, which we did with modernization and new construction projects, and we have submitted applications that are sitting in that waiting list. We used our local dollars to fund those projects with the hope that we would be able to leverage those funds to continue doing that good facilities work in our district. If you cease to stop accepting applications, I think that will prevent our ability to pass future bonds in our area. We are surrounded by agriculture. Our city is pretty much built out. Developer fees will be diminishing. So our ability to fund these important school projects will be very severely impacted. So we would urge you to do the important work, to make whatever modifications or improvements are necessary to the SFP program within the existing tools that you have to do that important work. But please do not stop or do not cease accepting applications. That would be very detrimental. Thank you.
Good morning. Alana Cunningham, Jack Schrader and Associates, and we serve as a school facility consultant to small, medium, and large districts throughout the state. And in the interest of demonstrating the need for a future bond, it's critical that the state continue to accept applications. It's difficult to show a need without empirical data, and the acceptance of applications would provide that data to state voters to show that there is a need. On behalf of our clients, we request that you continue to accept funding applications. And on another note, with regards to the equity of the program, we acknowledge that it is a challenge for small districts to access state funds due to limited staff resources and just resources in general. However, we'd like to point out that the SAB item, pages 102 and 103 of the item, show that 9% of the funds have been apportioned for small school districts, while 7% of the state's enrollment is for small districts. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Jeff Frost. I represent the California Association of Suburban School Districts, which is about 40 of the largest suburban districts in the state. Two districts that you have heard from today, San Juan Unified and Dublin, have or are active members in that organization. I also represent the Central Valley Education Coalition, which are the school districts and county superintendents in the counties of Tulare, Kings, Madera, Fresno, and Merced counties. They each have a little different perspective in terms of overall need. Suburban districts obviously have a different take on issues like hardship than my Central Valley clients do, which are mainly rural and poor. You have also heard from a couple of people today who have spoken very eloquently on that. I wanted to provide a couple of sort of overarching points given that I'm not here representing one individual district, but a series of districts who have school facility needs in the state program. I want to start by saying continuity is critical. I think you've heard that in a number of ways, but I'll put it in the superintendent or school business officer perspective, just looking at school funding issues, not school facilities, but school funding generally. They would rather have continuity of funding than more funding, because continuity creates the ability to plan. And you have heard that in terms of the application process. That's the equivalent of your LCFF funding. If you don't have that, if you shut that off, you change the entire way that local school districts look at their planning and the political elements of passing local bonds. Everyone needs to make sure that they can say there's a state share. If the state is not a partner, and I go back 20 years with Mr. Lyon in terms of the SB 50 program, and he is right in the context of unbelievable antagonism between the parties when that program, or before that program started, and subsequently when it was first getting going. And pretty much for the last 18 years, we've been on the same page with the three-legged stool, which does include the builders. But in our current situation, it has created significantly more tension. I think eliminating the application process, even if it's for a short term, adds more chaos into that process. I think maintaining the true unfunded list is really critical. People have talked about being able to calculate what the need is. I think you've heard a lot about what that need is today, but I think that is really important. And then the final thing I will say is one thing that I think Mr. Lyon also brought up, perhaps in a different context, and that is that we're at a point where there is a lack of continuity and sort of togetherness in terms of what the program should look like moving forward. I don't think that should be done through a regulatory process. I think it's time that the legislature takes a look at the program moving forward. We're about to have a new governor, and I really think that that is the best approach as opposed to the set of regulations that have been proposed to date. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Vaca. I'm with the Riverside County Office of Education, and I'm representing Riverside County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Judy White. I've submitted written remarks in writing, and I think that most of the points I was going to make have already been made more eloquently and effectively by the speakers who preceded me, so I'll be very brief. I just want to touch on a couple of, like the previous speaker from San Bernardino, I want to share a little bit of information about Riverside County. Collectively, the County Office of Education and the 23 school districts in the county, we educate 430,000 students. It's about 7% of the state's population and roughly quadruple the amount that we were serving in 1980. Between the years of 2000 and 2010, we were the fastest growing county in the state. But at the same time, because of the recession and other factors, our land wealth dropped precipitously during that period. So it is not hyperbole or an exaggeration to say that without the school facility program, the statewide school facility program, and the partnership between the state and local school districts, we would not have been able to either build or modernize or improve our school sites in Riverside County. Our dirt is cheap, so to speak, and our mean assessed value per student is just a little over half of the statewide average. So many speakers prior to me have commented on why we see this as, now this may be a little bit of hyperbole, an existential threat to the school facility program. I think it's fair to say that we see the list as an expression of the state's commitment to that program. And under the circumstances of which this was brought forward with not a lot of notice, and it did somewhat catch us by surprise, that I think it's fair to say that we did react as if it was a statement on behalf of OPSC that we should be doing away with the school facility program. We agree with many others that there should be changes made to the program. We have been and will continue to be engaged in those conversations and look forward to those conversations. As Mr. Frost stated just prior to me, we also agree that the legislature should be involved in that conversation, and we're hopeful that moving forward we can have that discussion in the next session. But in the meantime, we would respectfully request that this item not be brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We are approaching we're a little past the halfway point. Can I get a show of hands for folks that still want to come up so we could determine whether or not we need to take a break? Okay, so let's do this. Let's take a quick break until about 11:45, and then we'll come back and we'll keep hearing from folks and go from there. So it's about, let's go about 15 minutes, so 11:45, 11:46. Thanks. We're going to get started here in a minute or two, folks. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and reconvene. I'd like to invite up the next set of four. As we're coming up, we wanted to get a sense of two things that we're hearing from the morning session. I guess we're still morning technically from our before the break session. And I wanted to get sort of the group's thoughts on this, and I think best we can probably do is head nods here. But a theme that we're hearing from folks, I want to make sure that we're understanding it and see if this is properly characterized. But what we're hearing from you, in addition to a lot of the other points, is that despite the uncertainties of the acknowledged list, despite having to submit the document that says there's no guarantees, the lack of guaranteed funding or guaranteed program structure in the future, that even with that risk, that the cost that you have spent on your applications to submit and be a part of the acknowledged list is in fact worth it to districts. And I just wanted to make sure that we're hearing that, we're understanding that, and that is a true statement. Okay, thank you. And then the other piece we wanted to just ask and remind folks of, and I know we touched on this a little bit, but we have heard from you, keep the existing structure. Obviously, our item says stop. Still looking to see maybe if there is any middle ground, any solutions to address some of the things that we have raised that would meet the needs of folks as far as keeping the list. So if you have those thoughts, or as we're continuing to go through speakers, if something new comes up, then please feel free to come back up again if that wasn't part of your original comments and you'd like to add on for comments like that as well. So with that, we will go to our next group at the table. Thank you.
Are we in afternoon yet? No. Good morning. I'm Ana Ferreira with the School Energy Coalition. We represent schools statewide on issues related to energy and water. And I can't really add a whole lot to, the speakers have been phenomenal and they're out in the field. So from an energy perspective, after echoing the important timing, continuity, cost, and chaos issues expressed by the earlier speakers, I would only say that adding to the complexity of putting together your application are new Title 24 upgrades for energy and green codes that must now be followed, that given that we haven't had a bond since 2006, we really are going to see a lot of those new upgrades and regulations come into play, which will add to the cost and chaos. Schools are also being not to mention water conservation standards and stormwater on the horizon. It just makes everything a lot more complicated, and they have to take these things into account. Schools are also being used more often as staging and relief evacuation centers in times of crisis, and the fire season is now upon us if it ever stopped. We need schools that are up to date and prepared and resilient. So that means that schools are also taking into account the very real situation that they may face with power outages and other issues that may come up with these natural disasters. So any disruption of the intake in this program of applications, I think, just adds to the headache and the length of time and the cost for developing these applications, and we would ask you to consider that as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Rebecca Curley on behalf of the County School Facilities Consortium. We want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come here and have this dialogue and really explore and better understand some of the issues that were in the write-up, and then to bring our feedback to you. One of the things that we're looking forward to is continuing that conversation, hearing your thoughts and your response to all of the complex issues that have been raised today will be very helpful for us in continuing that dialogue and having a better understanding of your analysis and interpretation regarding all of the comments that you've heard today. So we look forward to that. My comments here today on behalf of CSFC are primarily related to the inequity and program enhancements items that were in the write-up. As you heard previously from some of our executive committee members, county offices don't have the authority to issue local bonds. And so we really are dependent on the state program to fund construction and renovation of facilities. We looked at the data that is in the write-up related to smalls and their participation in the program. And one data point that we wanted to bring back to you is county office representation in the program. We've received approximately $1 billion from the school facility program since its inception. And that has really gone a long way to doing the projects that help serve students such as our special education population, our alternative school students, and others. So for us, the program has really been a lifeline. It's critically important for us to be able to do these facilities which we may not otherwise be able to do. Another thing that I want to bring forward for your thought is the financial hardship program, which is really related to the inequity concept. It anticipates and corrects for disparities that may exist in the ability of districts and county offices to bring local resources forward. So eligibility is based on the lack of capacity or the age of your building, and then the state funding is adjusted based on your ability to pay. And we feel like that is a very appropriate way to think about equalizing the opportunity and access in the program. And for that, we've really appreciated the financial hardship program. Eliminating the lists, we believe, would greatly disadvantage financial hardship districts and county offices in particular. When we have concerns, when there are concerns expressed that the program could maybe better serve those who lack an ability to pay for their facilities, or maybe have greater needs than others, the answer to that is not resolved by cutting off the program in the hopes that there will be some future program that will better meet needs and fill in those gaps. It doesn't make sense to us to essentially stop the program in hopes that a better one will emerge. And as far as financial hardship projects and how they move through the process, they receive a design apportionment to help them fund the process of going to DSA and CDE and developing their project, and then coming back to you and asking for their construction apportionment. If you cut off the list, what it does is we would then have to compete with everyone in the rush once the door opens back up and there's funding available, and we would be kind of a step behind in the process. Under the current process, we can at least get in line and say, hey, we need some assistance here, and then we begin to move through the process. When funding becomes available, we're at least partly through the process. Absent that option, we don't have a way of moving forward in our planning. And then the last thing that I want to leave you with is the idea that you've heard today from many speakers, planning takes multiple years. But really, the need doesn't go away. And so if we don't have some idea of what we're planning towards, we still have that need that continues to build. And for county offices, we really don't have another way of meeting that need. So with that, I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. And to, if I haven't been clear enough, we have great concerns with the proposal, and we hope that you will reconsider it. Thank you.
Laura Preston with the Association of California School Administrators. And as the previous speakers have said, I mean, I can't repeat or even want to try to repeat what some of the prior speakers have said, especially those who are coming from the field. Those are the types of things we hear all the time from our members statewide. The one issue that I want to bring up, and it's a little bit of a bird walk, but it hasn't been brought up today at all, just more of an FYI, is the recent budget that just passed has all-day kindergarten facilities in there, and it's going to be on the state allocation board to develop the regs and to go ahead and distribute the money for those programs. There is going to be, once you are done figuring out what those regs look like, there will be a definite cause and effect to the applications that are coming in from school districts for their other projects. So we're concerned that if you stop accessing or accepting applications now, it's just going to confuse the field more for those districts that are interested in accessing these resources for all-day kindergarten. Thank you.
Erica Hoffman on behalf of the California School Boards Association and our over 5,000 members and the 1,000 districts and county offices statewide who are all in opposition to these regulations. I do want to associate myself with most of the comments, in fact, all of the comments that have been said previously today. We really see the elimination of this list as putting a big, huge kink in the middle of this program. You've now stopped the ability to officially track the needs of statewide needs for facilities, for both determining state bond issues, for determining local bond issues, and also for providing that information to the public for when they vote on either and or both of those issues throughout the state. So for those reasons, we really wish that you would pull back on these for at least at this point in time. Let's have further discussions. If there are issues and ways potentially that we can reconfigure this program, that's going to need a long-term discussion. And I don't think this should be able to be done within the short amount of time that it's had. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Before you leave, thank you all. Can I ask you to elaborate a little bit on the impact of the kinder program? I want to make sure I understood the point.
Well, I don't know that we really know what the impact is. Nobody's brought it up today, so I wanted to bring it up just as a you know, just to put it on the radar. So the budget, as you know, has $100 million for all-day kindergarten, and it's up to the state allocation board to develop the regs and to distribute the money. If it's going to, if whatever a district gets for the all-day kindergarten grants, is it going to impact future applications that they have for their entire, you know, for calculating their total amount of money that they're going to be able to get? I think it just adds an additional layer of confusion at this time with this new program that's just come in.
And if I could add to that one more thing, when you look at the fact that all of these applications, be they currently filed, on-filed, in process in districts, they're very long-term as far as in their development. This kindergarten piece is going to add to that long-term development issue. So that's going to be another thing that the district's going to have to wrap their heads around of how do we then either plan for this, incorporate whatever the needs are into current plans that are pending. Because, you know, these aren't necessarily going to be, we're not going to be putting portables on the back 40 for a lot of these kids. It's what do we need to do to make sure that if we do have something that's currently on record or we're developing something to be filed in application, how does this then fit in with it?
How does it impact eligibility for your other programs is really what it's about.
And Barbara, maybe if I could also add, you know, we, schools are looking at lots of different pots of money to put together a project on a site, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the projects that are being done, you know, may be funded by multiple programs. There's language in the trailer bill that talks about supplementing and not supplanting funds when you access this program. So it's very likely that schools would be thinking about how can they leverage that funding source with other funding sources, including the school facility program, in order to do a holistic project at the site.
Okay, thank you all.
I may be the last one. I'll be brief. There have been many, many good comments today, and I will echo just some of those. My name's Lori Ruiz. I'm a school planning and state funding consultant. I work with Corinne Loscott, and we have many, many clients. And I just want to provide an example. For an example, a new school project comes to OPSC, that project has taken 5 to 7 years of planning before it even comes to OPSC. And it costs millions of dollars just to get to that point. Now, my fear is if you stop accepting applications is what's going to happen with this new school if it's occupied by the time, during the time that you're not receiving applications. Does that project become ineligible if, in fact, the program gets ramped up again? And that's a big concern because of the not only time and dollar investment into getting that project approved by the different agencies, DSA, CDE, complying with DTSC, CEQA, local municipalities, negotiations with developers, getting the site approved. There's so much that goes into that process. And then with the potential that this project may not become eligible if you stop accepting applications. Now, the challenge that you have with that is that you're building a new school because the kids are coming. The enrollment's going to be there. So you have no option. You have to build that school. You can't delay it. And it just creates a level of uncertainty for a lot of school districts in their planning efforts, especially when it takes 3, 5, 7 years just to get the project up to the point of being able to submit to OPSC.
Hello, Ken Reynolds, President of SchoolWorks. I've been in this business for about 30 years now, so well before the SB 50 program came into place. And again, we're out there helping districts, not just with getting some state assistance for their projects, but with several other services too. In fact, I know a lot of the people that have spoken here and have done work with them. There's two real points. Like I said, I agree with everything else that's already been said. I think there's two real issues that I sort of want to summarize. One is this regulation is not a solution. You've identified some problems, some concerns in your position. One of those was, is this fair for the small schools? And we've heard, everyone's united, this proposed regulation does not help deal with that inequity that you were worried about. In fact, I don't believe, and most of the speakers do not believe, that there is an inequity for smalls or for financial hardships. And the majority of our clients are small schools, a lot of them in the Central Valley. And so if we're going to be proposing a regulation, it should have a solution. Saying we're going to stop accepting applications under the current program, we don't know how long, we don't know when it would restart, and we don't know what the program would be if it restarted. And so if we knew all the answers to that, then you can come back with this regulation and say, okay, we're going to stop on this date, we're going to start a new program on this date. When we changed from the lease purchase program to the school facility program, we didn't stop the LPP and then decide later on to start the SFP. It was a continuous flow. And that is the type of solution that would work. So we need to do more homework. We need to come back with a better proposal. The second thing I'm concerned about in your regulation item was when you were referring to the problems created by having a workload list or an acknowledged list that was so long. Now, that, of course, is a huge problem. It created lots of delays, and districts had to decide whether they're going to start their projects or not after they had signed these resolutions stating that there was no guarantee of state funding. And as you see, the needs are there. They had to go and build. We have some appeals now coming to the State Allocation Board where projects were built, but they don't qualify on the date that the project was processed. And I have other projects where they didn't build, and again, they still don't qualify for as much as they originally asked for. Those issues will have to be resolved. But the problem was created really based on the fact that there was a time delay from the previous bond till this bond. We went 10 years without a state school bond. But the core reasoning for that delay was the Great Recession that happened. And so unless we believe we're going to be facing the exact same condition, I don't think it's fair to hold this program hostage for a significant event that happened in our recent history. I think it is possible for us to find a true financial solution to funding schools to keep the program active, to keep the state as a valid partner in school facilities in California. And so those are my comments. Thanks for your time.
Hi, Darren Waters, Valverde Unified, again, sorry. But just to address Barbara's comments, your summary of comments, and to clarify, no, I don't like the effort and expense of the application process. Assuming there's a program change, I would suggest that the application process be streamlined, shortened, and cost reduced the application process. While I believe an LEA should have some skin in the game to enter, we don't want people just putting their whatever project on this list. There's got to be some skin in the game. Maybe it doesn't need to be as rigorous and costly as it currently is for this, just for the new list. I'm talking post Prop 51, just something to consider. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else that, okay. No, any other speakers on any of the topics? Anything to add? Okay, well, it looks like we've had all the testimony that we are going to receive for today. So again, we very much wanted to thank you all for taking the time to be here, for taking the time to write in, for taking the time to watch the webcast. We really appreciate your involvement and the feedback that you've provided today. It's very helpful, and we also appreciate the opportunity to partner and make sure that we're all working together. So again, thank you. We will take this back and absorb and analyze the comments that we've heard today, and then figure out next steps. And then I do want to invite you to keep posted for the website for next dates for any follow-up stakeholder meetings. We will be following our normal process of a 10-day notification for the public meetings. So we don't have that date set yet, so we will keep posted on that. And with that, if there are no further comments today, then we will go ahead and conclude this meeting. So thank you very much.